Hello and welcome to another episode of GTN Coach's Corner, where we try and answer all your triathlon related questions so you don't have to hire a coach. Just joking, you should probably hire a coach, but you can think of us as your personal coach. Drop your questions in the comment section below, and the next Coach's Corner hopefully will answer your questions. So, on with our first question of the day. Wayne McNeil writes, I'm starting out and a friend told me that I should work on my stamina first and power later. Is this true? It would be good if it is, because I can't afford a power meter. He goes on to say, also as a beginner, is there much difference between clipless mountain bike shoes and regular road bike shoes and pedals? Both good questions, so let's do the first one. Do you work on power or endurance first? Well, firstly, you don't need a power meter to work on your power. That's a definite thing you can do without. You can work on power without ever looking at your actual power numbers. All you need to do that, short intervals, 30 to 60 seconds of slightly higher power or significantly higher power than you normally do. That little boost to your fitness, to your bike output, will make a huge difference to the gains you get on the bike. So it's never too early to do that. Your friend is right in that you want to build your aerobic base and you want to build your muscles, your tendons, your ligaments, etc. before you start putting in miles and really hard work on the bike. You don't want to be tearing your legs or injuries or anything like that early on when you're just starting out. But throw in some short efforts, 30 to 60 seconds, right from the beginning. See how you feel. Don't overdo it, but you will see some massive gains. So don't be shy to put a little power out into the pedals. So on to his next question. Clipless mountain bike shoes or regular road bike shoes pedals? Well, clipless mountain bike shoes are a lot easier to deal with. You've got dual-sided entry on the pedal, so it's a lot easier to clip in, it's a lot easier to get acquainted with, and it's a lot easier to just get on and off the bike. So if you're new to it, don't be shy to use those mountain bike pedals. They're also a lot easier to walk around in the shoes than road bike shoes, which have got those cleats on that are really awkward. However, once you get going and once you're getting a bit more advanced, you will want to look at shifting to road bike shoes. Your power transfer is better, you're going to have a more stable platform, and they're just more comfortable basically. So do make the transition, but there's no rush to do it. If you're still comfortable in your mountain bike shoes, stick with them for your first few triathlon. On to our next question. If my training involves a 3-cycle hard weeks, followed by 1 easy week, how easy should the easy week be? On my easy weeks, I generally keep the swim the same and reduce the bike and run volume by about 35%. Well, it looks like, Francois, you're on the right track. 35% is a good starting point to reduce your volume for that easy week before you go back into 3 more weeks. But the real question is, are you feeling recovered and fresh at the end of that recovery week? Because that is the main goal of your recovery week. Don't be afraid. If you're still tired, if you're still feeling a bit niggly and you're not really ready to jump back into training, you probably need an easy week. And don't be afraid to make it really easy if you need to. Don't worry too much about how much efficiency, how much fitness you lose in that week. You will lose next to nothing. And you'll gain it back and then some if you're really fresh and ready for those hard weeks that are coming up in the coming weeks. I think that answers that quite well. On to the next guy. Stephen Gibson asks, I recently did my first race of the season. Going into the race, I felt I'd made some good progress with the swim, having joined an open water swim group, practicing drafting, sighting, etc. During the mass start of the race, I went out hard to get a good position in the pack, and I got completely swum over and dunked. I then panicked, struggling to breathe. Basically, it ruined my race. So do we have any advice for him? We can definitely help you with that. This is a very common problem, and it's basically the reason that triathletes fear the swim and maybe even fear triathlon itself. The swim is intimidating and mass starts even more so. One bad experience then compounds that, and it's really hard to ever get over it. The problem really being the only time you can practice this is in your race, because you can't really practice with 50 other guys running into the water and all getting into your rhythm. So you never really get to practice it until it goes wrong in your race and it ruins your whole day. However, there are a few things you can think about to prevent it getting out of hand the way it did for you, where you are suddenly unable to breathe and being swum over by multiple people. Firstly, if it's a mass start, try to self-seed. If you know you're going to come out in the top third of the swim, start in the top third. If you know you're not coming out in the front, don't start in the front. People will have to then swim over you. So you want to avoid that. The new self-seeding rolling starts, which they're using for a lot of triathlons, do help with this a lot, because 10 athletes go into the water at a time. You're always a bit more spread out. Despite a lot of people's protests about how they're ruining mass starts in triathlon, they've actually been a really good innovation for triathlon safety and enjoyment, really. If it is a mass start though, don't go out too hard. I hear him when he says, I went out hard to try and get a good position in the swim. That's a good idea. If you know that the people that you're running into the water with and staying near are going to swim 2, 3, maybe 4 seconds faster than you, you'll hear the pros talking about doing that because they know that already. They know that they're capable of swimming maybe a 1:15 per 100, and the guys that are around are capable of swimming a 1:12 per 100. So it's well within their ability to sit on those feet and stay there at 1:12 per 100. When you're in a mass start with a whole bunch of unknowns, you can't predict how fast those guys are going to swim. You're better off just self-seeding and staying within yourself than trying to swim on feet that you won't be able to swim on, then getting dropped and getting a whole pack coming over the top of you. If the whole pack does start coming on top of you and have found yourself in the middle of it, the best thing to do is to keep moving. He says he stopped, struggled to breathe, so then everyone swam over him. That just compounds it. The best way to get space to breathe is to keep moving in the same direction as everyone else. You might be moving a bit slower than them, but you're unlikely to get swum over. As soon as you stop and do breaststroke or put your head up, that's when people are going to literally swim straight into you. Try and keep moving, and if you can, move to one side or the other side of the swim pack till you've caught your breath. You can then start creeping back in and get on someone's feet that are a bit more comfortable and finish your race strong, finish your swim leg strong. On to our next question. This one's from Milos Selic, I think. Hello GTN, quick question. Since basically all energy gels nowadays have caffeine in them, will they have a bigger effect on us during the race if we abstain ourselves from caffeine for a couple of days prior to the race? Well, good question. Not all energy gels have caffeine in them, and if you are sensitive to caffeine, you're well worth finding the ones that don't. However, caffeine is always a performance enhancer. It's legal and one of the few performance enhancers that still are. So if you're not sensitive to it, it's well worth investigating using it in your race. It will boost your performance. But there's some things you have to be aware of with caffeine. It can dehydrate you, it can cause jitters if you take too much of it, and it can, and often does, upset your stomach. So if that's an issue, you need to be very careful with how much you take. Just enough to get the performance benefit without taking too much to actually ruin your race. So to answer his question, does abstaining actually increase the boost you get? Well, there's been a lot of investigation into this, obviously, because everyone's interested in caffeine and it's so freely available. The answer is yes and no. Yes, you can get habituated to caffeine, and therefore the caffeine that you do drink will have less of a performance and boosting effect. Of course, it still does have an effect. As all coffee drinkers will tell you, they've been drinking coffee for years and still they get a boost from the coffee that they're drinking. So it doesn't go away completely no matter how long you've been drinking coffee for. Also, if you cut out coffee for at least 7 to 14 days, the next time you take coffee or caffeine, it will have a bigger effect than it would have if you hadn't abstained at all. So there's a small performance benefit to it. And if you're willing to put up with not having your coffee for that last 7 to 14 days, maybe it's worthwhile getting that extra boost. However, you will still get a boost if you haven't abstained. So you have to weigh up whether it's worthwhile getting through all those things that a triathlete has to worry about in race week, your last few training sessions, your recovery, travel to the race, packing for the bike, unpacking the bike, bike check-in, all of that without any of your coffee, just for that tiny little boost, or whether you just take the small boost you were going to get anyway and keep having your coffee and be in a happier person maybe in the week leading up to the race. I guess that's your choice. One more question today, and that's from Victor Diaz Duvivier. Is it realistic to train for your first 70.3 with no coach? Is it possible? Coaches are expensive for students. Okay, Victor, we understand. Coaches are expensive and not everyone can afford them. Our first advice would still be consult a coach. We know, but it's a good investment of your money. If anything you're going to spend money on in triathlon, start with a coach. If you still can't afford a coach, yes, the answer is absolutely. You can train for your first 70.3 without a coach. What it's going to take is a little bit more time and research and effort from your side to make sure you don't make those silly mistakes. Basically, if you get a coach, what you're paying them for is for them to have learned or maybe even experienced those mistakes so that you don't have to. If you can't afford that coach, then You need to do it the hard way, reading articles, investing some time in learning, or even watching videos like these to figure out the things that you need to know to do your first 70.3 properly. Maybe even in a once-off program with one payment, you get your program and you can adjust a little bit for your race. Or you could just leave your questions down below this video with the hashtag GTN Coaches Corner, and we'll answer them in our next episode like this. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time for some more Coaches Corner questions.